So you removed your lawn. Now what? That's the topic of our video today. You want to take it away?
Of course. First of all, the first thing you need to do is to research your ecoregion. You need to know where you're at and specifically, what ecoregion you're in, and that will direct you to what plants you need to grow.
Additionally, you need to observe your site specifically. So, in addition to what zone you're in and what types of plants grow there, some of us are in wetter zones or drier areas. We locally are here in the watershed of our local river, the Anacostia River.
Shout out to Anacostia, baby.
Absolutely. And also just see how many hours of sunlight different parts of your yard get throughout the day, how much moisture naturally comes through your yard. When we moved to here, our yard was really, really wet. There were frogs and a lot of moisture that was just hanging out in the lawn. So
for real, it was like true water holding capacity, because at one point I was like, I think there's a spring in the backyard, because I saw water coming from below and I was like, oh my God, how are we going to deal with the water? And I think going back to what Abby says about paying attention. So first you want to observe how the elements interact with your yard. And I think a year is a good time for that. I think, we did it pretty fast and we had to watch and do it as we go along. But because of that, we had to make a lot of changes. So if you are like in it for the long haul and, not rushing to create the ecosystem, then spend some time and watch how the elements interact in your yard. It was very informative seeing how the frogs were interacting with the yard, and they led us to little puddles that were in the yard. And so when we sheet mulched and add wood chips, it absorbed a lot of that moisture. So now we don't have those water spots anymore, and all the algae is like drying up.
yeah, also see what fauna visit your site. So do you have deer? Do you have groundhogs or squirrels? What types of birds do you have? Figure out how that's going to impact what you plant or what you want to have in your garden, or what you can have, what the fauna will allow you to have in your garden.
But part of paying attention to the fauna is then it brings you to pay attention to the flora, because they have this deep, long-standing relationship. And when you add plants to that landscape, then you're either providing or you're not. Plant is like a huge contributor to the food web. A lot of different varieties of insects depend on that specific plant for survival, and those insects are just like really important to the local food web. So yeah, those are keystone plants that support the highest amount.
Yeah, so we are followers of the gospel of Doug Tallamy.
We're lucky because we're in our neighbors' yards. We're surrounded by oaks and northern white pines, and that's another thing, is that some of the zones in your yard might not be in your yard, but the trees around you and your neighbors, their landscape support your landscape, and vice versa, or not support your landscape. So I think there are a lot of keystone trees around us, but the shrub layer is lacking, the herbaceous layer is lacking.
The ground cover layer is severely lacking.
Because of like invasive plants like the English ivy that's just wreaked the havoc on our forest floor. So yeah. Definitely, I think observing will also bring you to the invasive plants that are around your space and that you have to manage.
So let's talk about sourcing those keystone plants. Once you identify the plants that support the most life in your region, where do you find them?
Well, to be honest, I watch a lot of workshops, and then I go on Etsy.
Etsy is one place.
Etsy is one place that a lot of small growers sell through, and I prefer to support small growers, and then I can find growers that are local.
Yeah, we found some in Maryland
and in Virginia as well. So that's a good way to find them. And there are a lot of online nurseries
If you're lucky, you'll also have in-person native plant nurseries in your area. In our region, there are some good ones in Northern Virginia. We are pretty far from Northern Virginia, so we haven't been there. But there's also another Maryland-based one that had like a couple plant sales at a local cider brewery or mead brewery or something like that. So find the native plant purveyors in your area and try to support them. It's a good local business to support. You can also find native seeds. The best way I would say is to find native seeds that are in the woodlands around you. So foraging basically for seeds. And these will be especially strong because they've been adapted to your specific ecoregion. So they will be the most hardy to whatever environmental pressures are common in your area.
Another good way is like joining your local gardening community, talking with your neighbors, and also like your local native plant society. I think there are a lot of them. Like you have the Maryland one, you have Virginia one. So yeah, go on the Facebook forums. There are a lot of people that are willing to give you seeds if you look the right places.
Yeah, you can also find native seeds online, as you have mentioned. Not only can you find plants on Etsy, you can find good seeds various places online. They won't be adapted to your ecoregion, so it won't be quite as good as finding ones locally, but it's an option and definitely something that we have done plenty of. And another thing is, in addition to keystone plants, think about what pollinators you'd specifically like to attract to your garden, like specific butterflies, moths, different kinds of bees. There are hundreds of native bees here in Maryland. And keystone plants give you a breadth of service to your local insects. So they give service to the widest number of insects, but it's also important that we go deep and we go through that depth. So while keystone plants support the greatest number of species, having these plants that have these unique relationships that they've co-evolved with pollinators over thousands of years is also very important and very special. So keystone plants are the most important, but don't sleep on the plants that may support a smaller number of species, but are still very vital to your environment. And although you can't have every plant, that's one reason why you want to, so maybe some people can, but in our small yard, you can't have every plant. And so figure out the pollinators and the moths and butterflies and bees that you specifically would like to attract and find the plants in relationship with them and provide those.
Yeah, because you can't grow every plant, but you can try.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think that's such a cool thing to talk about, because we had disagreed about it. I was like, yeah, keystone plants, and I'm like, and you're right. Sometimes it's even worse for that insect that has that one host, and it's just like we're planting keystone plant and forgetting that one. It's like, so,
it's even more rare, and then it's even it's just easier for those pollinators to go extinct. All right.
And I think the next tip is to plan and map your garden. I think when we moved on this site, we imagined what we wanted in our heads, talked about it a lot, and our years of gardening before kind of like informed each other of what we liked and what we didn't like. But when we got here, we sat down and we got a pen, paper, and looked at the yard, mapped how the sun and the rain interacts with the yard, and then we started to plan the garden. So in the north, so we wanted a forest garden at the back, and that's what we did. We started to add the plant out from the crepe myrtle.
Yeah, we have one ugly tree in our yard, which is a crepe myrtle that got really fungal. It was covered in invasive porcelain berry, but it's the only tree in our yard. And the birds love it. Definitely the non-human species around here like the crepe myrtle a lot more than we do. And so because we only have one tree in our yard, well, we've added fruit trees since then, but we only have one mature fruit tree in our yard. And so it wasn't really a resource we could dispense of. So we're learning to work with the crepe myrtle, even though it's not a keystone species. It's not really, it's certainly not really supporting our pollinators, but working with what we have in this horrific urban hellscape that Mother Nature never planned for, we are learning to work with the crepe myrtle tree.
Yeah, so we're interacting and adapting, and that's a part of observing and interacting. And I think, so we wanted the forest garden. So we're like, we want a forest style garden. There are a lot of mature trees around us. Why not invite and tie that in? And so I think we've been working on that sub canopy layer, so and that shrub layer. And then and we've added pawpaws around there. We've added a cherry tree, button bush, like we have lingonberry currants, like we have a lot of shrubs, and we're coming down to the forbs, the flowering native plants that we have around there, and that those woodland ephemerals. So we're trying to work on that succession and building it out to be a forest garden in the back. And as you come closer to the house, that's where we have more sunlight in the middle, and that's where we put our sun trap garden. So it makes use of the most sun throughout the day, and that's where we get most of our food production done.
Yeah, thinking about our forest floor garden, we think not only what we want in our garden and how our garden can serve us, but also how our garden can be of service to the habitat around us. So as we've mentioned a couple times, there are a lot of beautiful mature trees around us that I'm looking at right now. But there are a lot of holes, a lot of gaps in what would have been here if humans were not doing the type of development that we do now. And so we're trying to fill that void and build back a little bit of what might have been here hundreds of years ago.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the plants that we have filling in that void later on in the video.
So another thing that we learned is the importance of mass plantings. We, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, we would love to grow every beautiful native plant that has ever lived in our region or ever adapted to our region, but we can't fit everything. But we really tried, and we would have like 2 or 3 plants of a bunch of different plants. And that actually is not in great service to the pollinators. Pollinators much prefer a mass planting. They want to be able to go from flower to flower to get nectar from a bunch of different blossoms. They want to have a nice big meal, a nice big buffet. They don't want to have tapas, you know.
No,
they do
they
not
don't
want
want to
small
have
plates.
tapas,
So making sure you have mass plantings to actually be in service to the pollinators is essential, and it's something that we're working on. We're trying to beef up our plantings, plant things more densely, plant a bunch more of the things that we've started in years past to kind of make those areas of our garden a little thicker.
And like and separating them and spreading them out. So a lot of the plants are like in clumps now, and we're just pulling them apart and creating that mass. And that's in nature of like starting out from a blank slate, because when we got here it was just lawn, like this very thick lawn, like
lush grass,
very lush grass.
For the turf grass lovers. I'm sure they thought,
but
it was
still
nice.
held water, and there were still puddles in the yard, but you wouldn't know until you walk over it.
Yeah, very spongy.
Very spongy. So yeah, I feel like we were working with a blank slate, so it was hard to create that mass. But we're in our 3rd year now, and I think the plants are saying, I am here and I'm here to stay. So I'm really excited to see how the yard awakens in spring. So stay tuned.
That's right. Anything else about planning and mapping your garden that you want to put in there?
Map your garden on paper, right? In the plants that you have, because in the dormant season, a lot of your plants will go dormant, and they won't have an above ground part that you can see, even though you should be letting a lot of that stay throughout the dormant season. But knowing what's in your yard, so when you're adding to your yard or you're planning your next year's garden, you're not like overplanting one thing when you had enough of it. So it just keeps you updated on what you have, what you might need, and what's actually in the yard.
And I think also mapping the intangibles is helpful, you know, like shading in what is a full sun section of your yard, what is a partial sun section of your yard, what is a section of your yard where a lot of water is held when during or after rain.
And how long does it hold it? And that will tell you how much organic matter, like the wood chips or mulch, that you might need to absorb that excess water, if you do. And if you don't have excess water, then that organic matter holds whatever water that it gets for a longer time than if you had nothing.
Yeah. So you want to talk about timing?
Time is crucial, man. Timing is very crucial, and it starts in fall, especially if you want to establish like perennial plants, fruit trees, food forests, a native plant garden. You want to be planning that like end of August, seeing that what you want, ordering the seeds that you want, or getting the starts and plugging them in fall so it can experience winter, develop a good root system, but also be able to flower for you.
A lot of perennials don't flower until the second year.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's just a reality. So relying heavily on annuals in the first year will make you happy. So you get your nice blooms that you want to see.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I think like we're not dogmatic about native plants or anything like that. We just know that it's crucial for even annual production, because when the local insects and fauna interact with the yard, they go after the native plants first. They have favorites, so learning their favorites and putting that in. And I always go back to the American beautyberry, just how much, yeah, abundance was there, and they knew it was there, and it was just gone like that.
Yeah, they were very ready to. They wanted us to put in 12 beautyberry plants, not one. So we were taking some cuttings, and hopefully we'll have more soon.
Yeah, and we plant like ground cover, berry producing ground covers that are native, like the native bearberry. We have a few varieties around the yard to provide those little berries for the fauna that are around here, so that we can have the big berries, like the strawberries that is on the floor. So having a grown cover, fruiting ground cover like strawberry, but also having a native fruiting ground cover, so that you're actually sharing with the local fauna, because don't be selfish.
Yeah, and they don't just like things better that are native. They've co-evolved with these species over thousands of years. The species provide the amounts of protein and fat that they need to thrive, survive, raise their young. So it's not just about a matter of preference. It's actually about a matter of survival.
Oh, jinx.
Yeah.
So time is essential, just like annual gardening. You want to be able to put in stuff and start seeds at the right time. Also with your cuttings, your food forest, just source the stuff at the right time, so that you can give them a good chance at, you know, serving the local fauna, if not for yourself, in that first and second year.
And once you make your garden plan, you figure out your timing, then it's time to just get your plants in the ground. Don't be afraid. Getting plants in the ground sooner rather than later is always better. And don't be afraid of messing up, because you can always grow plants. You know, we think of certain beds in our garden as like our own nursery or whatever. You know, we put plants there to kind of grow and establish, get a little bit bigger. And then when they've grown up a little bit, we put them in what is more going to be their forever home in our garden. So don't be afraid to mess up. Most of the plants are very forgiving. And putting things somewhere and watching them grow and watching how they respond to a location or an environmental situation, whether the water or the sunlight, will be informative for you. So every day, every month, every season in your garden is a learning experience. And every year I feel like I know so much more, because I've lived with the plants and seen the plants every single day from that year.
And we see how the birds interact with the yard, or how they come and sweep the floor like at some time of the day and go next door and just continue doing that. And I think, yeah, that's really important to do. And it helps your garden, it helps you produce more. I think we've devoted a lot of our space to plants that are just supporting the ecosystem, and people still come here and they're like, oh, you have a farm, because we produce that much annual food. So don't be afraid to allocate more space to stuff that are not annual production.
That's right. And finally, I would say, you know, we're not permaculturists, but we watch a lot of permaculture videos online. And one of the principles of permaculture that I think is very valuable is observe and interact. This is just a process that will be, for us, a lifelong process, a lifelong way that we interact with our garden. We'll always be seeing how things react to different spaces, including like changing environmental elements. Climate change, but even also, you know, as certain things grow up more and maybe certain parts of our garden have more shade or whatever, you know, things change every year. The only constant is change. And so continuing to just keep an eye on the plants, and even something might have been happy in a place for a while and then ends up not being happy there. You know, things change, and it's okay to respond to that change.
And I think with moving stuff too, we move stuff from fall through to spring. All through winter, we're moving things. Once the ground is workable, we're moving perennial plants, and they don't mind it. So don't be afraid to, you know, as Abby says, don't be afraid to make a mistake, and don't be afraid to move plants around into better spots. And yeah, I think we'll be moving plants around for a long
We
time.
moved some today.
We moved some today, and that's cool. That's fun. It gives you something to do in winter. So next, I think we're going to show you this hedgerow that we have behind us. It is a fruiting hedgerow,
Many fruits. Yeah.
many fruits, but many native plants as well. So we're going to show you how we do, or what we call an advertisement to the plants and people and insects. This piece of strip was thick lawn, but it looked really small when we just got here. But now that we've added so many plants to it, it just makes it look so much bigger. But here we have our fruiting hedgerow and also a native plant garden. And we want this to be a great advertisement for not only gardening and permaculture, but also for native insects to know that they have a refuge over here. So I'm going to talk about the plants that we have growing in this hedgerow, and hope you like the information. Over there, so in this strip of the garden here on the right, we have in forbs, which are plants that die down in the winter, in the dormant season. They're flowering herbaceous plants. We have Mexican agastache, narrowleaf mountain mint, butterfly milkweed, phlox. I think it's a marsh phlox. American dream coreopsis. We have wild geranium, Maryland golden asters, purple coneflower, Joe pie weed. We have licorice, swamp milkweed, rattlesnake master, lobelia tupa, great blue lobelia, yarrow, clover. We have daffodils, prairie coneflower. We also have perennial herbs such as rosemary, sage, saffron crocus, comfrey, and as we have a few ground covers, wild geraniums, wild strawberries, have sedums, bearberry. Yep, and over here as berries in this hedgerow, we have American beautyberry, elderberry, blackberry, and bearberry. And for grasses, we have little blue stem, purple lovegrass, and we have annual lemongrass that we put over here. We also have a allspice, a Carolina allspice, right in the middle here. It's not a fast grower, so we're able to grow a lot of forbs around it for now. But as these plants mature, then this side of the garden will respond as well.